Hello everybody. This is Kathleen McGrath, also known as Mrs. McTutor on my YouTube channel. Here in New York State, our students take the ELA Regents Exam, typically in 11th grade. It's part of the Common Core Regents exams that other states might also use. So this is a video lesson about helping students with part one of the ELA Regents, which is the reading comprehension section. Strategies for success. So part one of the English Regents is reading comprehension. There are always three passages on the test. Passage A is always a literary passage. So oftentimes it's an excerpt from a short story. I've seen it, a memoir or an excerpt from a memoir, and it usually has 9 multiple choice questions. Passage B is always a poem. Sometimes it's a very lengthy poem. Sometimes it's a very short poem. And there are typically 5 multiple choice questions. Passage C is always an informational nonfiction text. Oftentimes it's a science type of text, but not always. And there are typically 10 multiple choice questions with the informational nonfiction. So I looked over a lot of Regents exams, many years of Regents exams, to see what patterns that there were. And the most common questions in part one relate to author's purpose, making inferences, finding evidence in the text, vocabulary and context always shows up, and literary techniques and literary elements, there are always questions about those. There are certain ones that typically show up more than others, which relates to the next screen. So again, looking over many Regents exams over many years, I was just looking to see which literary elements, which literary terms come up most in the questions. So these are the ones that I tend to see come up the most. Conflict, both internal and external conflict. There are many questions based on theme, symbolism, point of view, characterization, figurative language. There are questions about metaphors, similes, personification, hyperbole, setting, diction, imagery, contrast, repetition, mood, tone, irony, structure, and shifts. Although shifts is the last one on this list, there's oftentimes a question about shift. So when you see a major change in the storyline or a major change in a character's attitude, that would represent a shift. So in the poems and in the literature, we often see shifts as questions in the text. Okay, so the most essential reading strategy by far, in my opinion, is annotating. So what is annotating? Annotating is a really important reading strategy. If you're not familiar with it, you definitely want to get familiar with it. It's really just a system of taking notes while you read, as you can see here in the visual. Whoever was reading this poem has underlined important information, circled keywords, and of course put some notes in the margin. Okay, it involves active reading. You have to be a really active reader if you are annotating. Or if you are annotating, it helps you to become a very active reader. Okay, it involves, is a big word, metacognition. I love the word metacognition, which really, it's a big word that just means thinking about thinking. So you're thinking about what you're reading, and you're also just thinking about your thinking. So you're saying to yourself, do I understand this? What does this mean? I didn't get that. I should read that again, right? So you're going to think while you're reading, but then you want to also think about your thinking. Am I understanding this? Can I say this in the margin? Do I need to read this again? So you always want to annotate when you read. Here you see another text. You see important information is highlighted, but definitely see lots of notes in the margins. If you haven't already checked out my video about annotating, you definitely would want to do that because my annotating video lesson really takes you through, what is annotating, how do you do it, but most importantly, why should you annotate? So I do have a video lesson about annotating here on my channel, Mrs. McTutor, if you'd like to check that out. Okay, other essential strategies for part one. You definitely want to highlight important information. You want to keep your annotations short, okay? It shouldn't be a burden. It shouldn't interrupt your reading flow. Really just think of your annotations as labels in the margin, Okay, when you get to the part where you're answering the questions, you definitely want to look back at the text. Even if you think you're going to remember, you always want to go back and read that part of the text and get the full context so that you're more likely to get the question right. Of course, we want to use process of elimination, so don't forget that process. Don't skip over process of elimination. Cross out the answers that you know are not correct. See if you can narrow down your choices to about two, and then you'll choose your best answer. Okay, so now you should try one. You can read an annotated Regents passage. There are many online if you don't have, have one handy. Then you could use all your strategies to answer the questions. Okay, so that's really my best advice for how to get through part one of the Regents with those three passages and to get the highest score. Okay, be sure to check out my annotating lesson that I was just speaking about. And also, if you'd like, you can follow me on Twitter at Mrs. McTutor. And also subscribe. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'll be informed every time I post a new video because there will be many coming. All right, thanks so much for checking this out. Take care.